my little hug me cushion. Hello beautiful friends, welcome or welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be talking about all the books that I read in March. We're technically not at the end of March, but we're pretty close to it, and I just don't see myself finishing an entire other book before the end of the month. So I'm just going to tell you everything I've read for the month so far. I have got my stack here, and if you've watched my TBR video for March, you will know the 6 books that I chose for March. And of those 6 books, I read 4 of them. And I am not gonna lie, I'm very happy with that outcome. I was honestly a bit nervous because I'm just that type of person where if you try to tell me what to do, I usually immediately do the opposite. Like, I don't like being told what to do, even by my own self. So there's been months where I pick a TBR and then just despite myself, I don't read any of them. I don't know why I'm like this, but I am sometimes, and this month I wasn't. So 4 out of 6 is pretty good, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. I also ended up reading some other books spontaneously throughout the month, so let's just get straight into it. So far for the month of March, I've read 8 books, which also is a phenomenal reading month for me. Like, okay, I'm just gassing myself up in this video today. I'm going to probably discuss the books in genre order, not the order that I read them, because I just think it makes sense. There's quite a few non-fiction books that I think just would be best grouped together, just in case somebody isn't interested in those and can skip them. So of those 8, only 1 of them was a fantasy, 2 crime, 3 crime, oh my gosh, 3 crime books, and 1 historical fiction, and then 3 non-fiction books as well. So I am going to start out with probably my least favorite book of the month, and it was the first book that I picked up, and that was Dance of Thieves. Dance of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson. It is a duology. It follows, oh my gosh, I need to remember the names. Kazi. It follows Kazi and Jace, and I think I kind of let myself down because I made the mistake of going into this book with ridiculously high expectations based on one person's raving review, and I just took that as gospel, and I was like, this is the best book in the world. And it really wasn't for me. This is a young adult fiction, and I don't know what it is. I think maybe I'm young adult fictioned out. Like, I just think maybe I need to step away from the genre and get some distance and read some adult books. This one, just the plot was lacking, the romance was lacking, there was so much miscommunication. It was very insta-lovey for me that I think that this entire book could have been 5 chapters if the main 2 characters just sat down at a tavern, grabbed a pint of ale, and they were just honest and said what they wanted. And I get that, like, they can't trust everybody, blah blah blah, but like 5 chapters in, they're kissing each other and like just telling each other that they might be in love, and at that point, if you're thinking you're in love with this person and you still can't be honest about what you're doing, then like, what is that even? And also, if you had have just communicated and told each other the truth, it was a little bit hard to follow, guys. I'm so sorry if this one's your favorite, but I did not enjoy it. So I rated this a 2.75 because the writing was good. The writing, like, dialogue was not great, but the actual style of writing I enjoyed. I don't know if I want to rule this author out completely in the future because of that reason, but I definitely think that her YA books, you know, these ones in particular, not for me. So as I said, that was the only fantasy read this month. So I'm going to move on to the 3 crimes that I read. And again, this is not in the order that I read them, but let's just group genres together for simplicity of this video. So the first crime that I read of the month was Everybody in This Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson. This I ended up audiobooking, and it was very easy to listen to. I ended up listening to this, I think, in a day. It was just very entertaining. This author is Australian, so it was set in Australia, and there was themes that were Australian, which obviously was really nice to see. Just like different little elements depicted from my culture and where I'm from, and it was really good to kind of get that from a book, which is rare. So I enjoyed that. I also loved the sarcastic storytelling of the main character in the book. Like, it was very relatable, it was funny, it was entertaining. Sarcasm is literally my second language, so I was loving that element. He was a very likable character. I ended up rating this one at 3 stars, so like a solid 3 stars, which is not bad. But there was a couple of things about the book that I didn't love, and they were more to do with specific character developments rather than anything to do with like the flow of the book. I think the book, you know, the way it was written was fantastic. Obviously it flowed really well. There was a lot, the storyline, the plot was great. I just felt like some elements to characters were a little bit far-fetched for me. For example, the main male character, when the story starts out, he's saying everybody in my family has killed someone, and like I'm here to set the record straight of who's killed who and the circumstances and what happened and this whole story, and he's including himself in it. And at the beginning, his kind of attitude towards it is humorous, but also he's got this very righteous, self-righteous attitude about him. To put it bluntly, at the very beginning, he's very against murder. He is almost like the voice of reason in his family, has this very strong moral compass of what's right and wrong. And then by the end of the book, obviously, he ends up killing somebody. And that's not a spoiler because it's very clearly depicted in the title and also the very first chapter. But it just, for me, it wasn't believable, the transition from that attitude that he had at the beginning to the events that ended. I felt like in order to do that, his moral compass would have needed to be tested throughout the book, and him slowly kind of like transitioning to that, I guess, like Anakin's style dark side. But it felt to me very jolting, like a 180. Like, he was really against his family's behavior and some of the actions that and choices that they'd made, and then at the end he's just making the same choices, and there's not really a bridge between why that happens. And the only other thing I would say is that throughout the story, it's told in a way where he obviously goes back to the beginning and he's bringing you along in the journey, and he's kind of explaining what happens with his whole family in a way where you, the reader, find out along with him. Yet at the end, there's like kind of like a climax, like it's building to a moment, and then at the end he sort of stops, and then he sort of just suddenly says, oh, and then I realized everything, and let me tell you everything, in sort of more like an info dumpy way. And he sort of just like talks at you at the end of the book. And like, I will say, I didn't hate this, because when he's sort of info dumping the rest of the mystery, kind of like putting all the pieces together of the puzzle finally, he tells you a lot of subtle details that you miss throughout the book. So I enjoyed that aspect of it, but once again, it was very jolting to go from 80%, 90% of the book being told in this way to then at the very end just changing it up and having it be more of an info dump. So those things took away from the book a little bit for me, but all in all, I had a really good time. It was very entertaining and obviously very easy to read, and I loved the author's writing style, so I would recommend that one. So the next crime book that I read was called The Only One Left by Riley Sager, and I had it on my Kindle, and this one was one of the books on Goodreads that had the most positive reviews, or like the highest ratings. So this one was interesting. This definitely gave me very Verity vibe. Basically, one night the entire family ends up murdered except one of the daughters, and she claims at the time that she didn't do it, but she couldn't explain who did it. She didn't say, you know, she didn't come forth with any information for her innocence, to support her innocence. She just says like, I didn't do it. And so they didn't have enough evidence to convict her, so she never got convicted. She lives as a free woman, but she's not free because obviously the entire world and that town especially all believe that she's guilty, and so they've basically just completely demonized her. And as far as you can tell in the opening setting, she just kind of keeps to herself. And this is flash forward to the future, to a point in time where she's now an old woman. She needs in-home care, and it follows the storyline of a carer who has also kind of gone through a bit of a scandal at work, and so she's desperate for work. She wants a job, and she gets offered this job, and she's reluctant to take it because of obviously all the rumors. She's a little bit scared because, you know, if this woman really did murder her whole family, then she could be dangerous. But she has no choice. She really needs the money and she needs the job, so she ends up taking the job, going to the house, and that's where the story begins. I rated this I believe it was a 3.75. So pretty good rating. And like, the more I think about it, the more I think it could be rounded up to a 4-star, but I'm not convinced yet. I just think like there were elements to it that I guessed a little bit ahead of time, and that could be because I've read a lot of crime books recently. I could honestly have done with a little bit less twists and turns. I would rather build up to one big reveal, one big twist at the end, and kind of like I enjoy that more than like lots and lots of little twists. But I did enjoy the ending. I thought the ending was very clever and I would recommend. Okay, and then the last crime book that I read, A Killing Cold by Kate Alice Marshall. And again, unexpectedly picked this one up. This is another author that I haven't read before. So this book follows Theo and Connor comes from a very wealthy family, the Daltons, and he and Theo are very newly engaged, and they've only been together a few months, and his family, who are obviously quite wealthy, are a little bit skeptical of this relationship. They think that they're rushing into things, but they both get invited up to the mountains for a family retreat, which is like this family owned property. It's massive. There's like cabins, skiing, all this stuff, and the family go up there every year, and normally they don't invite outsiders, but this year, because obviously they're engaged, they've decided to invite her up there. And so she goes along, and all we know from her story, she doesn't give a whole lot away initially, is that she's got a past that she's trying to keep a secret from her new fiance, because she really, really wants the relationship to work out, so she doesn't want him to find out about her past, which we don't know initially what that is. And then the basic plot is that she gets there to this retreat, and she just finds things a little eerily nostalgic. Things are familiar to her in a weird way, and you realize that she actually has a lot of trauma from her past and she doesn't remember a whole lot. And then once she gets there, she starts to find that her memories start coming back, and that's essentially the plot. And that you've obviously got to read to find out. I did enjoy this. Like, I did find the writing to be really quite good and really captured my attention, the way it was written and the way the chapters ended. Like, it was very exciting. However, the ending just sort of started to become a little bit drawn out, and I wasn't quite sure how it was going to end. I rated this one a 3 stars. So again, like a solid 3 stars. Honestly, it took me a little bit longer to finish this book because I did find that in the middle, it just kind of fell a little bit flat. I wouldn't say this one was quite as thrilling as other crime books that I've read, like where you really captured and you literally can't put the book down and you've just got to know immediately what happens next. I did find that with this one, that wasn't the case, and it was a little bit boring, and I felt like they maybe could have got to the point a little bit sooner, but I enjoyed it. I did enjoy the end. I almost got really annoyed at the end. I didn't know which way it was going to go, but actually really pleasantly surprised by the way the decision she makes at the end. I was really impressed with that. So 3 stars, not my favorite crime, but definitely not the worst. So yeah. Okay. So the final fiction book that I want to talk about is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. So this was the only historical fiction, general fiction book this month, and okay, I'm just gonna start out with my rating. This was hands down 5 stars. 5-star rating for me. I feel like my life paused when I read this book, and I read it quite quickly. I think like within 4-5 days I read this book. I ended up audiobooking parts of it as well. Phenomenal audiobook as well. Like, sometimes you find a book and you try to audiobook it and it just really takes away from the experience, but this was definitely not the case. I really enjoyed the audiobook, and to me it just enhanced the experience of reading this. Yeah, this book swept me away to another time and just kind of held me captive there until I finished. And in this really sick, twisted way, I felt like I was moving through this book so fast, and didn't want it to end. And then in another way, I really wanted it to end because I really wanted to A, find out what happened, and B, get to the part where people in this book were no longer suffering. And I feel like if you've heard any reviews about this book, then you already know this is not a happy, fun time. This is not a wholesome, cozy time. This is not anything like that. This is a tragically, heartbreakingly beautiful story of two sisters who are living through World War II and in France. And it is just like, I'm gonna struggle with words. It is just one of the most eye-opening, inspiring, heartfelt stories that I've ever read. And like I'm literally, I feel like I'm getting emotional just talking about it. I really was blown away by this writing, this story. Like, I'm so impressed. This was my first Kristen Hanna book. I'm so impressed with the author. I think what she did with this book was so important and so powerful, and I just absolutely adored it. And it's a weird thing to say about a book that contains so much horrific, horrible events, but I in the sense that I appreciate what it was made to do and what it was communicating, the message that it was communicating. I really appreciated that so much, and I absolutely adored this book. And I've just, like, I've seen on the back of the book that it's actually soon to be made into a major motion picture, and I believe they've already chosen casting, and that is just absolutely something I'm really looking forward to watching and seeing this brought to life, and I hope that the movie does it justice. So yeah, 5 stars. 5 stars, 100%. I don't know if that this is a book I will ever pick up and reread, because I don't feel like it's one of those ones that you need to, but it will stay with me forever. Okay, so that kind of wraps up all of the fiction books that I read for March, and there are 3 books left to talk about, and they're all non-fiction. Honestly, they're all either personal development or spiritual related, so I just feel like, disclaimer, if you're not interested in hearing about any of those, then feel free to click off now. And I hope that you enjoyed listening to the general fiction books and my thoughts. And if you are interested in sticking around for those, then amazing, let's get stuck into it. There were 3 books that I read non-fiction. Where is my phone? And I'm just going to go through them quite quickly, because it's really hard to, I guess, talk about and review personal development books or self-help books, because obviously it's just such a subjective reading experience. Like, everybody gets something super different out of it. So I guess I'm going to talk about what I got out of it, and just fully know that you may get something totally different. It's not like there are tropes or things that you can kind of look for in these books. They're all so unique and they're all so different. I ended up just picking up Ikigai, I picked up the book by Hector Garcia. And this is like a very tiny little treasure of a book. It's very short and sweet. I audiobooked this as well, and it was probably about 3 or 4 hours, 4 hours long, I think. And I rated this at 3.5 stars. Ikigai is essentially a Japanese concept whereby your purpose in life is to find your Ikigai, and that is essentially the sweet spot between, and let me get it up for you so I can get this right, your passion, what you love, your profession, what you're good at, your vocation, what you can be paid for, and your mission, what the world needs. So obviously, if you can find the sweet spot in those 4 areas of life, you obviously will never work a day in your life. Like, you know that saying, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. So this concept, this little book was just discussing why that's important, and essentially following Hector as he talks about his own journey visiting Japan and visiting some of the small towns in Japan who have the longest life expectancy in the world, and he was researching why that is and exploring the concept of Ikigai amongst the community there and the culture there, and just trying to make sense of what it is that they've discovered that maybe the rest of us could learn from. And it was really good. Like, it was really good. I wouldn't say that it was like a profound, life-changing concept for me. I have heard of it before, and like I've heard it be described in other ways, but it was really enjoyable and really interesting to read about Japanese culture and how this comes into play and their beliefs. And he, you know, the study, the statistics, the data of all the people who own veggie gardens and all the people who, like, what was important to them, and some of them, like, were quoted, were quite funny. There was humor in there, and it was just it was really easy to read. It was a really good time. So, and I hope I'm saying it right, but yeah. So that was a really good short read for me, just traveling to and from work and in the car and stuff like that. I really enjoyed it. The next book that I read was, and this is another one that I think everybody has probably heard of, and that is The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. Yeah, I think a lot of people have done the quiz. So they're like, oh yeah, I've done the quiz, I've figured out what my love languages are, I've got the hierarchy, and yep, and I'm, you know, primarily touch and secondarily acts of service, or whatever it is. And I thought, you know, I wonder, like, this book was written originally, and then the quiz kind of came after that. And the quiz to me is like a very fast and easy way for you to just kind of get to know yourself better and get a deeper understanding of what you like. But I thought, I want to read this book and I want to see if there's more that can be, like, learnt or taken from the love languages as Gary Chapman created them. And so I listened to this book, and again, like, this was a really fast and easy read, and I think that's why I was just smashing the audiobooks this month. Like, they would just get in my ears. It was a really good month for that. And yeah, and The 5 Love Languages was really fantastic. I think, to be honest, and one of those books that you will definitely never regret reading it. Like, there are some concepts in there that if you're familiar with the 5 love languages, that you're like, yep, okay, I know what this is, I've heard of this before, I've heard bits and pieces, but I can guarantee you there is nothing you can lose by reading this book. I think everybody will find that there's something from this that they can gain, because in this book, Gary Chapman goes through and basically uses case study examples of his counselling, his couples that he worked with in counselling, whose marriages were on the brink of divorce, separation. They were really in the trenches, they were really struggling, and he uses those cases, some more extreme than others. Some were literally like, I want a divorce, and others were like, I'm not happy, and if something doesn't change, this is not going to get better. And he kind of just used all these different examples of couples with different love languages and how he used them in real life settings with real people. You know, I feel like it's so easy to just, like, read them in a list and, you know logically what each of them are, and it's very different to see them applied to real life relationships. So it was really insightful. It was really insightful, and it was really helpful to be able to actually take real life examples and compare them to my own experience and my own relationships and see where I could be going better. Something that really stood out to me was the fact that he talks about there are love languages and there are also love dialects. So two people could have the same love language, but they could be speaking it in a different dialect. And so communication breakdowns can still occur even if two people have the exact same love language, because one person expresses it this way, but another person receives it in another way. So it was really good. And that, honestly, I took that information into my relationship with my partner, and we sat down and we had a check-in and we discussed it, and it was amazing. It was actually really incredible. Then he ended up reading the book as well and listening to it and finding his own takeaways from it, and we just sat down and we talked about it and really explored ways that we could deepen our connection. I rated that a 4.5 star, like, definitely a very high rating for me, because I got a lot of value out of that, and it's definitely something that I will remember, and I get a lot. I guess I got a whole lot more out of that book than I did just doing the quiz. So yeah, okay. I promise I'm gonna stop talking at you in one book's time. The words are just coming and I can't shut up. Okay, The last book that I read in March is The Law of Attraction by Abraham Hicks, or by Esther and Jerry Hicks, who Abraham speaks through. If you know, you know. This is a very spiritual book that obviously if you've heard of the Law of Attraction, you'll know. But this is basically a guide of CDs. So like, let's say for example, I audiobooked this as well. There were 5 chapters on the audiobook, one that was introductory, and then it explores the 3 major laws and main laws of the universe, how they work, how we can use them to our advantage, and then the last chapter was more of like tips on exactly how to use those laws to get and create the life that we want. I'm just gonna say right now, like I feel like it's hard to rate personal development and spiritual books because it's such a personal experience when you read them. And I guess you just never know whether one book is going to completely transform the life of somebody and it's just going to be a very average read for somebody else. Like, you just don't know. This for me is not the first time I've heard this information. It's not even the second time I've heard this information. It's not even the first time I've heard this information from Abraham Hicks, Esther and Jerry Hicks. I have heard this information before, but it just resonates with me so deeply, so much. Like, I can't explain in so many words. I feel like it's one of those ones that I'm going to struggle to, but essentially, you know, if you've heard keywords like manifestation and manifesting and creating the life you want, and your thoughts control your life and things like that, concepts like that, this book covers them all. And it's from like just an incredibly powerful perspective of it. So 6 stars, but again, like I just feel like for me, obviously that's just a very personal rating. It was phenomenal, and I literally listened to the whole audiobook in 2 days, and I just went back to the start, pressed replay, and I just started listening to it again, and I'm listening to it through for the second time. I'm probably just going to keep going until, like, I don't ever want to stop really. I just think it's so important, and I think part of what builds momentum is having this information present in your life and not letting it slip away too much and forgetting that it's there and that that's, you know, how much power we really have. So anyway, I feel like I could bang on about that till the cows come home, and that's not what everybody wants to talk about all the time. I get that. So yeah, those are the 3 non-fiction books I read in March, and I really enjoyed the balance that I got this month. I feel like I got a lot of balance from between the fiction, non-fiction, and different genres, and like trying new authors and trying new genres completely with historical fiction in there, and obviously that was a huge success. So yeah, I am going to stop yapping and I'm gonna call it a day there. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to me yap about all the books that I read in March. Please let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought. If you loved them like I did, or maybe you didn't, let me know in the comments below. But I hope you have a fantastic week, and I will hopefully see you in the next video. Mwah!